morning, good afternoon and good evening. My name is Richard Clark. And for Throwback Thursday I've been talking about my favourite albums and favourite TV shows, but I've got a new series I'm starting today, and these are some of my favourite films. I'm not going to put them in order, but I'm going to start off with the first film, who I think is very important for someone who is born in 1981 and I think was a masterpiece, and that film is E.T. the Extra Terrestrial. So E.T. is a 1982 American science fiction film, produced and directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Melissa Matheson. Tells the story of Elliot. If you notice Elliot, it's got E at the beginning and an E.T. That's where they got the idea from, to keep that idea of symbology in it. A boy who befriends an extraterrestrial alien dubbed E.T., who is left behind on Earth. Now E.T., if we understand what E.T. is, E is dash in Morse code and T is dot, or one or the other. It's one or the other anyway. So it's like the first initial things of the only things with like one digit per thing. Along with his friends and family, Elliot finds a way to help E.T. to find his way home. The film's concept was based on an imaginary friend that Spielberg created after his parents' divorce. So this actual film is about divorce and about the idea of how children cope with divorce in the home, which was quite an unusual topic, because Kramer versus Kramer talked about divorce, but it wasn't done in the way as E.T., and this was also done with like science fiction slide to it. In 1980, Spielberg met Matheson and they developed a new story from the unrealised project, and in less than 2 months Matheson wrote the first draft of the script. The project was rejected by Columbia Pictures originally and doubted its commercial potential, and this is quite laughable because you're going to find out how much money it made at the time. It became the biggest selling film ever. Anyway, Universal Pictures eventually purchased the script for $1 million. Filming took place from September to December 1981. I was born in October, so very interesting on that idea. On a budget of $10.5 million. Kind of absurd now because people spend $100 million on these big Marvel films. But unlike most films, E.T. was shot in rough chronological order to facilitate convincing emotional performances in the young cast. This was a very unusual technique, so Spielberg did something quite unusual. Animatronics of the film were designed by Carlo Rambaldi. It wasn't Jim Henson, which is quite a surprise to me. Jim Henson did a lot of stuff in the 80s. So E.T. Actually, in the end, was the film in 1982, was released in 1982 June, and it was a smash hit at the box office. It surpassed Star Wars, which was the big selling film at the time, to become the highest grossing film of all time, a record it held for 11 years until Spielberg's own Jurassic Park surpassed it in 1993. And now obviously we know the biggest selling film now is Avatar. Before then it was Titanic by James Cameron. So E.T. was universally acclaimed by critics. It's regarded as one of the most greatest films of all time. Received 9 nominations at the Academy Awards, winning Best Score, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound and Best Sound Editing. It also had been nominated for Best Picture and Best Director. Didn't win them, obviously. They didn't obviously moan about it like they do now about, tokenism and so forth. And anyway, so the film was re-released in 85, and I would have probably seen that in release in 85. And then obviously it came out on video, which I have a videotape of. And again, it was released in 2002 to celebrate its 20th anniversary, with altered shots, visual effects and additional scenes. And then it was released in IMAX in 2022 to celebrate its 40th anniversary. The plot was aliens secretly visit Earth at night to gather plant specimens in a California forest. One of them separates from the group, fascinated by the distant city lights. US government vehicles arrive and chase the startled creature. The other aliens depart, abandoning him on Earth. In a near neighbourhood in San Fernando Valley, 10-year-old Elliot Taylor, suspicions are aroused when he pitches a baseball into a tool shed and the ball is rolled back. Later that night, we find out Elliot returns with a flashlight and discovers the creature along the cornstalks. He shrieks and flees the scene. Despite his family's disbelief, Elliot leaves a trail of candy to lure the alien to the house. Before bed, he realises the alien is imitating his movements. The next morning, Elliot feigns sickness to stay home from school and play with him. He can feel the alien's thoughts and emotions, shown when the alien accidentally opens an umbrella, startling him, and simultaneously Elliot several rooms away. So there's definitely like an empathic connection here. Elliot introduces his older brother Michael, who then becomes kind of like the father figure in the family. And then he also introduces 7-year-old sister Gertie. Gertie is actually Drew Barrymore. To the alien, deciding to keep him hidden from their mother Mary. So Mary is obviously living separately with the kids after the divorce from her husband. And when the children ask about the alien origins, he shows them by levitating several balls representing his planetary system and demonstrates his power by reviving a dead flower. At school the next day, he begins to experience a much stronger empathic connection with the alien, exhibiting signs of intoxication because the alien is at home and he's now drinking beer and watching television, freeing the flogs in his biology class. As the alien watches someone kiss, Elliot kisses a girl he likes similar to and is sent to the principal's office. The alien dubs himself E.T., reading a comic strip where Buck Rogers, stranded, calls for help by making a makeshift communication device and is inspired to try it himself. E.T. gets Elliot to help him build a device to phone home by using a thing called a speak and spell. This was an original speak and spell was how we actually they taught children how to speak and spell with this very primitive technology. Now an iPhone has like one app, is probably more bigger. So in this, all these different things, A.T. helps Elliot build this kind of contraption to try and contact his home with wooden coat hanger, foiled umbrella. I mean, it's primitive, and nowadays we just would laugh at it. But at that time, when you were a kid in the 80s, it's the idea of the dreamlike thing of what you could achieve. Maybe you could do these things. It's kind of like the imagination there, because we didn't have computers on that high level. Anyway, to go on, Michael notices that E.T.'s health is declining and that Elliot is referring to himself as we throughout this. The boys are unaware that E.T. is being tracked by government agents and all three of them are being spied on. On Halloween night, Michael and Elliot dress E.T. as a ghost to sneak him out, and they head through the forest where they successfully call home. The next day, Elliot wakes up in the field, finding E.T. gone. Elliot returns home to his boyfriend. Michael discovers E.T. dying next to a culvert and takes him home to an also dying Elliot. So again, they end up being in synchronicity. Mary becomes horrified upon discovering her son's illness and the dying alien, just as a group of government agents dressed in biohazard suits, led by a guy called Keyes, invades the house. Scientists set up a lab in the house, asking where E.T. comes from. The scientists are treating E.T. and the mental connection between Elliot and E.T. disappears. E.T. appears to die while Elliot recovers. Elliot is carried away, screaming that the doctors are killing E.T. as they try to revive him. When the doctors pronounce E.T. dead, Michael discovers that the chrysanthemums that E.T. previously revived are dying again. As Elliot recovers, the scientists return him to his family, but leaves him alone with E.T. Elliot says a tearful goodbye, but then telling E.T. that he loves him before closing the eye. Before long, E.T.'s heart light begins to glow, and Elliot notices the chrysanthemums is once again back to life. Elliot and Michael then steal the van. This is basically explaining the plot. Steal the van that E.T. has been loaded into, and Michael's friends join them on bicycles, evading the... This is where then it comes into the suddenly facing a roadblock. E.T. helps them escape by using telekinesis to lift them up into the air just in time and towards the forest like he'd done for Elliot before.
You have to walk from here.
So this is where the iconic Amblan logo comes in, and the idea of the music of John Williams, and it goes the idea of we see this, we think the alien and everything's going to be captured, and then they fly into the air. And at that time, that was probably something which, as a special effects now, looks very primitive, but back then was pretty special. For a child to see that was quite amazing. Anyway, as they get near the standing of the spaceship, E.T.'s heart glows, and they say E.T. says goodbye to the children, and then before boarding the ship, he embraces Elliot and tells him about him being there, meaning that he's connected to him.
Come.
Stay.
Ouch.
Ouch.
I'll be right here.
And they go off and the rainbow leaves, the spaceship leaves a rainbow in the sky. So that's the basic tale of E.T. Now, why this film was probably, it's quite interesting, is because, for example, a co-producer who worked on it was Kathleen Kennedy, who now does all the Disney stuff. Now, what she doesn't seem to do is she doesn't seem to learn what she's learned from these E.T. and these other great films she did with Spielberg. She doesn't seem to put that into practice about the heart of a film. The one thing Spielberg's very good at, and what something people always disregard him for, is that he gets the emotional connection between the audience and the characters. And then what he does, no matter whether it's an alien, whether you feel it's to do with any character, how you feel, what the characters are going through, he creates that emotional connection. He's a very good person of how he gets that connection between the audience. And it's why, really, Spielberg, to me, is one of the best directors, living directors alive. Not just because of how successful he is, it's because of how, like, for example, when he does E.T., most of it is filmed from a child's view. So he's doing it like from the idea that you're watching all the film like from a child's view, watching up. There's little clever things that Spielberg does which we don't always recognise straight away, but they're actually things, what they're doing for a lot of films now with really advanced technology, but Spielberg was doing that a lot with handheld, lack of technology. A lot of things were done on very tracks. I mean, the whole idea of the animatronics of E.T. was pretty primitive. Doesn't nowadays he would do that with CGI. So the actual stuff he created was very unique. Again, a lot of the stuff as well is where they looked at the idea of E.T. coming alive, was the idea of actually he looks kind of like the guy who did the special effects of the film. And the idea of that is to create something, though he was a puppet or an alien, he was quite humanistic in his response. So that kind of also helped people. In fact, what's an interesting thing is that a lot of people didn't think E.T. was going to be very popular. Mars, for example, refused to allow M&Ms to be used in the film, believing that E.T. would frighten children. So again, there was a lot of promotion things which weren't done. One of the things actually E.T. did have a big problem is they actually created a computer game by Atari for the Atari computer game system at the time, and it flopped. It was actually one of the worst games, and actually they buried them in the desert somewhere. So E.T. had some very interesting things of how they messed up things. It didn't really have so much of a toy development like, say, Star Wars did, but there was a lot of things where it created a culture of how the idea of we like things or how we identify things. So again, a lot of the things of the filming was very unusual. And then there's other stuff as well. So, for example, according to E.T., the scene in which E.T. disguised himself as a stuffed toy in Elliot's closet was suggested by fellow director Robert Zemeckis. So Robert Zemeckis actually was, though he was a fellow director, him and Spielberg pushed each other quite a lot. So that was where Hollywood was quite interesting, because it was friendly competition, but they pushed the direction, they pushed where they could go. So nowadays, it's not just they give a token director a film. These people, groups of people, were very skilled. So actually Zemeckis probably gave some ideas to Spielberg. Spielberg, in other films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, gave their advice. So yeah, we have to look at kind of these ideas of where we go. And there's all this ideas of stuff. So for example, the visual effect of the flying bicycle, that was actually filmed and reflected on the experience, was that they were on rigs. So they actually was quite high up, and it was this idea of how it worked. And it changed the way we looked at things. Music-wise, the film was done by John Williams, who'd also done Star Wars. So obviously and Spielberg pretty much works with John Williams, and Star Wars creator does as well, with George Lucas did. They also did an audiobook, which Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones did in the middle of Thriller. So actually in the creative times, Spielberg not only did E.T., he was also doing a storybook with Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, which Thriller was coming out. So basically in 1982, there was all this kind of stuff going on, which was kind of unusual. So it just shows you that all this stuff, all these creative people were quite, pushing each other, helping each other, and so forth. The themes of E.T. as well was based around the story of the parents' divorce, and it was essentially an autobiographical film about a suburban kid, apart from his uncommonly mystical imagination. So it actually refers to Spielberg's childhood. So, they always say autobiographical ideas. He used this idea, obviously it was an imaginary friend. And also, there's also other ideas that Spielberg talks about how he teased his younger sisters. But also the loss of the lives of E.T. being alienated by the loss of his father along with Elliot. So E.T. is alienated from his own family. He doesn't fit in. And then there's other ideas. Some people think of the religious ideas. There's also ideas they think of the retelling of Peter Pan from the perspective of a lost boy being Elliot. And all these ideas of that. And also there's another thing as well, which is very interesting for the film. It was about the idea of tolerance, and which would be central to future Spielberg films. So the idea of tolerance is the idea of tolerating something which is different, tolerating people who are struggling. So Elliot was struggling with the divorce of his father leaving. Being E.T., he would have struggled because he's away from his family as more like someone like an immigrant in that respect, because he's away from his own culture. So these are sort of ideas that we have to look at in the films, and this is why I think E.T. is an amazing film as a concept, but it's also there's a lot of stuff where people do, it's what they actually understand is this: when you create a science fiction movie, then you have it's something scary as a monster movie, and then at the end when it lights up, there's no dry eye in the house. So it's kind of like Spielberg got that balance right, and that's why it's a great film, because it's not only it has comedy, it has the drama, but it also has the sci-fi element. It has also good and bad and how that works, and to me, it deserves all its credit, and it's something as a film which sometimes people forget about. But for a film which is now nearly 41 years old, I think it's still a credible film. So if you haven't seen E.T. for a while, or if you've never seen it, please watch it, see what you think, and get back to me on your thoughts and feelings, whether you think it's out of date or not, or whether it could be improved, but I think it's still a great film.